Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Shaykhana.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Shaykh, we want to carry on our discussion with the approach of the street epistemologists.
Right.
In this episode, I wanted to discuss their practical approach. And
Sure.
one thing that I've noticed is they use kind of like questionnaires when they're engaging in dialogue with believers.
Yes.
The questions range from things like, what do you believe? How confident are you in your beliefs?
Yes.
How do you determine that your beliefs are the truth?
Yeah.
And is faith a reliable approach to determining these truths? How would we answer these questions if we should be answering them in the first place? And what are the dangers of, or what are the traps they may put?
So let's go through those questions one by one.
Yeah.
And of course, I've done my homework and I've watched a few of the videos of the movement prior to today's and last discussion. So I'm familiar with generally the outlook utilized, the approach utilized, and I can see how it's almost like a designed game where they've designed the questions in order to attempt to pull off some winning, indefeatable moves and kind of corner the opposite player, which I think to a certain degree lacks sincerity, and it only makes sense if we look at the world in a very black and white, robust manner. But nonetheless, let's engage with our questions and let's go through them one by one.
So if we go through the first question, what do you believe? It seems like a very generic question. What are they hoping to gain out of you answering this question?
So what they want you to say is basically, I believe in God, I believe in angels, I believe in... basically they want to put a label onto you. Just out with the conversation of street epistemology, I just want to give a relevant example which is pertaining to ourselves. There's been many a time where I've spoken to people and they've asked me, oh, so what religion are you? And I'll say I'm a Muslim. And if it's a non-Muslim, they might respond with something like, oh, okay, but what do you think of all this terrorism going on and ISIS? And you're thinking to yourself, well, mate, like, you know, I'm not bloody responsible for every single thing which every single person who claims to be a Muslim is responsible for.
Yeah.
Or, for example, you might say to someone, I'm a Shia, and they'll say, oh, what? So you're those guys who slash your backs open? I've never used those bladed zanjeers in my life. I don't think I've ever witnessed it either. So, again, I don't know why I'm being held responsible for whatever person X who happens to belong to said group does. And so this is the problem of labeling.
Yeah.
But in regards to how we would answer it, my first response would be, about what? Because, I mean, they haven't asked you what's your religion. Do you hold a religion, sir? No, they've asked you what do you believe. About what?
It's a very generic question.
It's a very generic question, so I would say about what? Do you want to discuss politics? Do you want to discuss morality? Do you want to discuss economics? And if you're now going to try and tell me, like, and the reason I'm answering with this is because I think it's particularly prudent that we state that, because are they now going to tell me that theories of economy are equally invalid to religious beliefs? Let's apply their canon and standard of evidence to pretty much anything we believe.
Yeah.
What do you believe? Well, I believe I'm a human being. How do you know you're a human being? Well, because that's what my teachers and society have defined me as. How do you know they're right? I don't. I kind of just trusted what they defined, because we have to come up with a category of some sort. But let's just go with the game they want us to play.
Yeah.
And I'll say, I believe in an almighty sovereign God upon whom the world is dependent for everything. I call him Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I believe he sent down prophets. I believe the last of those prophets is Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. I believe that message after the prophets was expounded upon, taught by 12 infallibles, we call them the holy imams, that one of them has gone into occultation and that he shall return at some point. Now what? What's the second question?
Second question you probably be faced with is how confident are you with this belief?
Yes, so normally if you watch the videos, what they'll add to that is they'll do a caveat of like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you? Now, what I would tell them is, I'm sorry mate, my reasoning skills don't work like that. You see, when I decide to believe in something, when I'm convinced by evidence, I don't normally come up with a sliding scale of numbers and go, well, you see, I think I'm at 7.5, mate. So what I would say is I'm fairly confident, yeah, fairly confident.
Because there is no defined Likert scale of, for example, of belief.
Well, what would you say is the probabilistic ratio between your confidence in you sitting right in front of me here and your confidence that the sun's going to rise tomorrow morning?
100%. Very confident.
100%? You're very confident?
Yeah.
Well, so you don't think it could be the last day today? And that the world could end in the big cosmic ball of fire that it's due to eventually reach?
See, these questions, what they're starting to do is put doubt into your mind.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And this boils down to David Hume's classic problem of induction, where he says that let's take a look at the life of a turkey in a batch of turkeys. Turkeys, the birds, of course, which are, well, of course, he was in Scotland, so he gave the example of in Scotland around the time of Christmas, and the turkey gets fed every day, and slowly one of the turkeys disappears. That turkey holds the justified belief that the next day he's going to wake up, get fed, and go to sleep. But what about when his day comes where that guy is going to take him and slaughter him? You see, can we be confident in all these things? I would argue that feasibly we can, because at the end of the day, that's just how life works. I can be confident that the sun will rise tomorrow because it's risen every other day. And I believe that I hold a worldview which accounts for that. I believe in a God, and every law requires a lawmaker, and so these natural laws will continue to function until God wishes them to cease. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Question 3.
Question 3 is how did you determine your beliefs or your belief system is the truth?
Yeah, you see, again, there's a little bit of audacity here. Like, does he want an autobiographical response? Does he want me to go through my childhood and say, well, you see, as a young boy, I always knew this, and growing up, I kind of discovered this and that? Or does he want me to say, well, because the Imam taught it to me? What he's expecting you to say is something along the lines of, well, my parents believed in it, and I've been raised to believe in it, and I believe it's true. Or he expects you to say that I had a miraculous experience that taught me that. But dare I say that for people that talk about epistemology, they're not very great at it. So what I mean by that is there's something called the genetic fallacy, which means that it's irrelevant as to how I came to believe something to be true. That thing's truth could be independent of how I came to believe in it. So for example, let's say someone asks me, how does the 206 bus come? And I say, well, it happens to come every time I walk out of work. And I mistakenly believe in a form of causation that my leaving work causes the bus to come. If I leave work now and the bus comes, does that mean that my mistaken belief about how it comes is true? No. But nonetheless, my belief that the bus will come when I walk out happens to be true. So irrelevant as to how we determine this belief to be true, I just view this as absolute sophistry, to be honest with you.
Absolutely. That leads to the final question. Is faith a reliable method to determining your beliefs? Like you claim that every time you leave the office, the 206 bus arrives. Okay. Is that a reliable way of determining your beliefs?
Yeah. So again, we come back here now to the pragmatic definition of knowledge. Do I know that there's an external world around me? According to some skeptics, there's no possible way for me to know that, because let's think of all the pragmatic ways we could know it. I could say, yeah, of course I know that Hassan Naib's in front of me because he's speaking to me. In fact, if I doubted it even further, you could come up and hit me and I could feel the pain. Someone could say, well, that doesn't prove anything. All that proves is that you're a brain in a vat and someone's inserting those emotions into your brain and making you think that you feel that. Sure, I guess if you really wanted to be crazy and kind of assume that everything's just an illusion, you could put forward that hypothesis. But do I have any good reason to doubt the external reality that's in front of me? No. Do I have any proof that could convince the utmost skeptic? Not at all. And so this is probably one of the issues I have with, we've talked about a paradigm shift in Aqidah in previous episodes, and we've talked about how sometimes people just look for the wrong thing. One of my critiques against what I call evidentialist religion, and what I mean by evidentialist religion is religions which fall upon an evidential philosophy. Allow me to explain evidential philosophy. Evidential philosophy would state that for every belief I have, I need something that justifies it. So, and I don't doubt that there are certain beliefs I need to justify. I need to justify, for example, why I believe in 12 Imams. That's definitely something I need to justify. I need to justify why I believe in prophets. But there are certain beliefs that could never be justified. And if you could justify them, let's look at how it works. Belief X requires belief Y. Belief Y requires belief Z. What do you do when you get to the very first belief you have?
Where does it stem from?
How would you justify it? You would need an infinity of different things in order to justify every belief. And that's why it's impossible to always justify things with something external. Let me give you the most basic example of why this philosophy and why this worldview is redundant. Can you trust your mind?
Yeah.
Prove it. What would you use to prove it?
Probably the idea that your mind will never betray you.
What did you use in order to come up with the idea?
My mind.
I want you to give me externalist justification that your mind works.
The idea that I'm dropping this pen, and I intended to drop this pen.
What did you conceptualize that with?
My intentions.
Your intentions come from where?
My mind.
So again, it's always going back to the mind.
Yeah.
Now, there are some people out there that would say, therefore you're right, I can't trust my mind, that's it, it's game over. No, that's absurd. You're going to tell me you can't trust your mind? You might as well go to sleep for the rest of your life. What we're saying is that there are basic core assumptions which everyone must begin life with. Number one, I can trust my mind. Number two, I can trust that my experiences haven't been placed there by a computer. So, for example, the belief that the world was created 5 seconds ago and that God has planted these memories into my mind is just as plausible as the belief that I was born in 1987 as I remember. Well, I don't remember it, but as I was told, yeah. But at the same time, I dismiss one because it's absolutely absurd. So what I'm saying here is that the street epistemologists need to understand that if we are to take the radical skepticism, we will push it, and we shall push that radical skepticism until they themselves are forced to admit one key fact and one key fact alone. And that boils down to the key question that we would ask the street epistemologist: could you be wrong about everything you know? Do you know what they would respond to that? Yes. All right, well, if you could be wrong about everything you know, that means you haven't proved anything to yourself. And if you haven't been able to prove anything to yourself, how am I going to prove God to you? Like, let's think about it. Let's think about it. Let's take the concept of a man who doesn't believe in anything. How are you going to be able to prove God to him? You have to prove something to him before he can believe in something as tangible as God. You have to be able to prove to him that he exists. And all these other factors before we can have that massive question. When someone says to you, I could be wrong about everything I know, that means they know nothing. I've often said that if a man were to ask me, can you guide me from here to the local, for example, tube station? I believe the local tube station here would be Colindale or Kingsbury. And I would say, yeah, sure, mate. You take a right, then you take a left, you walk down for 10 minutes and you're there. But I could be wrong, mate. What have I just done?
You just put doubt in his mind.
I've basically just said that I don't really know. Because if I'm telling him that you go here, you go there, and I don't really know, it means I've told him nothing.
But again, they're the ones who truly claim to have that desire to know. And
Yes.
the desire to seek the truth.
Sure.
Whereas we've just subscribed to this faith and that's it for us. We're done.
Oh, no, you see, there are a lot of people that just happen to subscribe to the faith. Unfortunately, that's the nature of a religion. It's always going to have people who are born into it. Does that mean that they should remain content with that? No. Allah Azza wa Jal wishes for us to come to know about Him and His existence and about reality. That's why He states, Man arafa nafsahu faqad arafa rabbuhu, upon the lips of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wasalam. That whoever knows himself knows his Lord. Why? Because through knowing yourself, through asking yourself these important key questions, you should come to a realization about truth. But when it comes to this great issue, we need to find evidence. What we need to do is we need to have a conversation which is based upon practical knowledge. Not this crazy theoretical knowledge where we're demanding evidence for literally every damned thing. That's just absurd. And I've pointed out what would happen if we literally required evidence for every single belief we held. What would happen when it came to the very basic belief of being able to trust my mind? Now, the difference between me and the street epistemologist is, I would say, yes, there are many plausible things that require evidence, but there are certain things which I can know to be true through having faith in them. So it goes back to that question you asked me in the last episode.
Yeah.
Is holding faith in anything a good thing? Yes. It's very good for me to have faith that I can trust my mind. It's very good for me to have faith that I can trust my memories. And it's very good for me to have faith that the external world around me is not merely a delusion of my mind, but rather does physically exist. And if I didn't have faith in those things, then I believe it would be impossible for me and that street epistemologist to get anywhere within the conversation. Does what I'm saying make any sense to you?
No, absolutely it does. Unfortunately, we've run out of time for this segment of discussing street epistemology, but inshallah in the next episode we'll conclude
Inshallah.
and understand further their ideology and ways in which we can tackle it and argue their case. But again, thank you for your time, Sheikh.
No problem at all.